Welcome back to Living the Reclaimed Life. I'm your host, Denisha, and I'm so glad you're here. Have you ever noticed how your body seems to carry the weight of past experiences, sometimes even years after that moment has passed? Trauma has a way of getting trapped in us, of showing up in unexpected ways and leaving us wondering how to find release and relief. In today's episode, Dale shares from over 20 years of story work about how our bodies hold on to trauma and how grief can actually be a cleansing gift to our hearts and bodies. This is a powerful conversation that reminds us healing is possible, even in the places that feel stuck. And before we jump in, I want to remind you about the Reclaimed Story app. Inside, you'll find a safe community of women, daily encouragement, scripture, and resources designed to help you walk your own journey of healing. It's free to download on the Apple App Store and Google Play, and we would love to connect with you there. Now, let's step into this conversation with Dale as we explore how to release the trauma our bodies so often hold. Today, we have Dale Hodgeson back on the podcast. You guys, if you missed the last podcast, episode 151, you are definitely want to go back and listen to that. It was so good. We talked about rupture in relationships. We talked about repairing those relationships. We talked about hope, trauma. Oh, such a rich conversation. And today is going to be, again, a rich conversation. We are welcoming Dale back to the podcast. He has walked alongside others in story work, which he really covered in the last episode, what story work is, for over 20 years. He has training from the Allender Institute in Seattle and Open Hearts Ministry in Michigan. Dale is passionate about creating safe spaces where people can bring their heartache and experience God's healing in community. And as part of the Narrow Gate team in Tucson, he considers it a privilege to witness the power of connection and redemption in people's stories. So Dale, our last conversation was so good. I am really excited about today's as well.
Yeah, me too. Can't wait to get rolling here.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing. It's not lost on me that what you offer, not only in these episodes, but with all that you do with the Narrow Gate, what you're offering is because you've experienced it yourself and you've done this hard work. We know that healing from our past trauma is such a journey. And today we're going to talk about trapped trauma and the process of entering trauma stuck in our bodies with connection, hope, and love. So yeah, how do we begin that one? That sounds deep.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd like to start just by saying, as you were talking about, the different places people are in this process, how important it is to remember when we're engaging, going from disconnection to connection and going through this process, that any movement forward is monumental. So you've had a lifetime of series of things that have happened and structures and patterns and themes that have caused harm in your life. And then you to go against that, because I think a lot of times people think they should be farther down the road or they should be something different. And I always look at any movement forward towards grace and mercy, towards connection, towards repair. Any movement is monumental. And we're not here to define where anybody should be. We talked last time about how we don't compare stories, because quite often we do that to not actually engage the pain of our own. So it's a form of contempt towards ourselves. So we're not able to, or do we desire to say you should be in a certain place or not be in a certain place? Because you are where you're at, and anything that you do to buck the old system is this huge, huge, monumental thing. And you have to go step by step. You don't get to jump over. It's layer after layer after layer. It's redemption after redemption. It's this process, this journey that's a lifelong journey. And I term these things, when we make connections, when we have repair, when we're able to grieve, those are just these monumental places of growth, but also of redemption. And so I don't ever get tired of redemption. that takes us kind of into this subject of stored trauma stress in our bodies, because like we never stop getting traumatized in our life. And I mean, yeah, I think it's pretty much impossible to not be traumatized in here. So ongoing trauma work, I think, is imperative to my overall health as a human being, because this stored trauma stress, which sometimes becomes a disorder of the PTSD, but the stored trauma stress causes so many, maybe not causes them, but amplifies or intensifies so many different diseases, mentally, physically, emotionally. And so we see that in the chronic pain, the chronic illness in the United States, the billions and billions of dollars in depression drugs, anxiety drugs. And I'm not condemning those. I'm just saying they're byproducts. A lot of it's a byproduct of stored trauma stress. And so we just look at this as trauma unaddressed, unentered, stays in your body. And so, and especially we're specifically, this lane is the emotional lane. I mean, like I go to the gym and stuff, and there's trauma stress released and stress released at the gym. There's other avenues to release stress, but they don't affect your heart and they don't affect relationships. And so that's what's so important about this particular lane that we're in, is this is about my heart. This is about relationships, and this is about love. And trauma, in its power to disassociate and disconnect, it ruins and cheapens intimacy and love. And so that's the war that we're against. We're going against it. We're going against that unseen force that's gone on for generation after generation after generation. You know, I kind of have a different view of the generational sin. Like, you don't eliminate generational sin because you can't stop sinning. Like, I view it as generational disrepair. I can disrupt generational disrepair like crazy. And so, I mean, there is some play that comes into these things. So if you hate evil, I can't eliminate sin out of my life. So I can't change generational sin through perfection. I ruin generational disrepair through repair, if that makes sense.
That's so good. Yes.
So my failure is the launching point to connection. And there's so much freedom when I'm not trying to be perfect. And so that's just another piece to look at as we're going into this longevity of why we would stay in a storywork type place. And I always look at it in the realm of care. Like, we do these groups, but we don't give advice. We're not looking to change you. And we definitely can't help you. You can only help you. I like to call these groups care groups. So we come into a place where we can care for you. And we care so much about you that we will say some really difficult things to you. And we're okay disrupting you. We're okay with your discomfort. And we're okay sitting with you in the deepest place of your pain and being on the blessing team and encouragement team when you're in those places. So, you know, as we just step into more of the process we talked about before, but only with a view of, we got all this information, scientific information of our brains, our bodies, how they interconnect, what goes on with them. And then, so I want to use these tools moving forward in my life through my own choice to deal with the trauma stress that's still in my body. And I still have childhood trauma stress in my body. I get triggered, and you know, I come from a place where there was a lot of talking. I mean, there was no connection. There was a lot of silence and fear and anger at the house I grew up in. So I don't have a lot of stories, and I spent some time fragmented. So I don't have a lot of remembered stories. I can tell you 20 stories when something went flying across the room. Didn't happen. But my body remembers all of it. And so when I get that feeling and it pops back up, I have opportunities then to care for those places in my life. And there are stories that do come up as time goes on. And that's what our story work is like, where, as an advocate for my young heart, what story do I need to tell on behalf of that harm that was done to me. And so that's part of this power of this process. And it's also this connection piece. So I'm really connected to my young self through these, like, I don't think there's a kid living in me. So I use young heart just because it's me. It's adult me, but my body is taking me back to young me. And even, I think we had talked off once before or twice before, but about being in the womb. And my mom was in a place of moving. They moved 5 weeks after I was born from Tucson to Louisiana, and she's 19 with a 1.5-year-old kid. So there was so much anxiety in her blood, and I'm sure depression in her blood and fear in her blood. So when I came into this world, I'm full of cortisol. I'm full of all of the biochemicals created through worry, through depression, and that's how I came into this world, full of all those things.
Yeah.
And so it's just good to know. And part of this process of dealing with this ongoing traumas is to know where you came from. Where did I come from? And I look at that through what was done to you and what was not done for you. And then the next question is, how did I get here? And so that for me is what have I done with myself in light of this story? And then where am I going is how will I choose to deal with my own young heart and the hearts of others? Mm-hmm. And so that's this process that we're in. So it's an ongoing journey, lifelong process of relationship building, of hope, of love, of intimacy that we're trying to engage through these traumatic deals. And it's also, for me, a lifelong journey of moving as much trauma stress out of my body as I can. And one of the aspects of that is that's why I do ongoing story work. I just wrote a new story 2 weeks ago and shared on a Zoom group thing that we had through Open Hearts Ministries. And things came out that were suppressed and shoved down and still disconnected from. So I've been doing this for 25 years, and so I'm still writing new stories. And my young heart has stories that needs to be told, and I get to be the one that tells those stories on behalf of silence, of suppression, of something that was never told, something that was never entered, gets entered. And I got people's eyes and faces and ears, and they're seeing me and they're engaging me, and it's healing. And so that's part of this stored trauma stress removal. I would like to use, for an example, my wife's death process. And she passed away 6 years ago of ovarian cancer. And we had just come out of the Allender training in 2016, 17, and we were on fire. We were just going to set the world on fire doing group stuff. And about 6 weeks after we got back from that, she got diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. So I think some of the things that came out of our training there had to do with regulation, had to do with touch, had to do with these really basic connections you make as a human being. And more, I feel, this is my interpretation of that, at a younger stage, like a little kid needs held. And the chemical reaction that happens when being held. So her death process was like 18 months, and it required her to suffer greatly. And I suffered greatly with her. My family suffered with her as well. But while she was alive and we were doing these things, we just did a lot of touch. I rubbed her in different places, and when she's suffering, when she's dry heaving from the chemo. And so you have lotioning because all of her skin's dead and it's dry, and just putting lotion. And I was somewhere in the hospital, and she had low white blood cells. She had to gown up and all that stuff. And this is where I really noticed it. I was rubbing her back, like I do a lot during that process. And then somehow something happened, and I took my glove off to do something, and I started rubbing her back again. I'm like, that feels good. And then that's when I noticed, like, this reciprocal connection in suffering. And so we purposely engaged in different processes to mitigate to take away some of the trauma stress as it came. But this is more trauma stress than you can digest. So it's a lifelong process to begin to keep moving that out of my body. And hence we're talking about why it's important to do that. So we, crying together, touch was a big deal. And just, weeping, grieving was a regular part of our process that we intentionally did. And talking about things, talking about her death, talking about her ascension, talking about when she's gone, what's it going to be like, and having those conversations so that it's all connection. And it's all this biochemical thing that goes on and I think that's where this really came to a lot bigger focus as far as the connection piece for me is when somebody's going to die, it strips away a lot of barriers and you just can connect in this really deep place. And that's what I felt the most in this process with Cindy is like you're moving, like I'm moving right now, like my body's moving and it's got things going on inside of it that are healing. They're not detrimental to me. My tears are never detrimental to me. They're also carry their own things out of my body, and I know how to cry and I know how to groan. And it's taught me a lot of stuff about my body in this process. And it's an ongoing deal. And even in her death process and after she died, I started making markers. And I would make markers and celebrate or notice different times to invite either my family in to mourn with me, because mourning is when we bring other people into that, and also for times for me to just grieve. And I'd have markers and pictures and bring things in and build fires and burn things and it's all this process of connection and movement. And so I just wanted to bring that up just to say, like, I'm still processing trauma stress from Cindy's death process. It still pops up with those grief spurts that pop up out of nowhere and just grab you. Also just the loneliness piece that just bites at you. So there's other things that come along with this process, but I'm just bringing this up to say that the importance for me and that I invite other people into is if it's unengaged, it stays. And over time, it causes your body problems. It causes health issues. It causes relational issues. So I'm just an encourager of that. And the space of care that we've created and are trying to expand and grow would be the place, to have grief groups, to have opportunity. But I've used this material in my team. We've been through a bunch of stuff and they have walked with me through my grief process with Cindy. When I go to Open Hearts Ministries, before we lead groups for a week, we have 5 groups of our own to work on our own stories before we do 12 groups. And I bring stories of Cindy's death. Been for the last 6 years, been bringing stories of her death where I've been harmed and where they catch me and they care for me. So it's not just my childhood past, it's current life and death. And there's so many deaths in life with losing jobs, with losing people, all kinds of things that happen in life where you had this thing and now it's gone, that, we don't want to forget those things either. And we don't want to forget our current life where we need care. And, as we're talking about this, it's also good to have done this work because your young part of you will show up in your grief. And the one thing I've noticed, especially in suffering, that we get young. Mm-hmm. And you'll use young words like scary, and it'll be that part of you that remembers suffering of some sort or powerlessness will be up in the front part of your being. So that's also really good to be aware of, because then you can care for that young part of a person as well as their adult self. And that was really instrumental for Cindy and myself, because we can tell when we're really young. So sometimes you have 2 young kids grieving because we're just we're not in the present. Like, we are totally triggered. And those are some of the sweetest moments we had because we knew each other and we knew each other there. And I just think that's another benefit of doing this kind of story work, is just that level of intimacy and connection plays out in our current life, even in bad things like loss. And so it just adds another element of sweetness and goodness and connection, even in loss. And I just want to add that piece to it before we move into, some other things we can do to do some long-term care as far as trauma staying in our body.
Dale, thank you so much for sharing about Cindy. I know that's still a tender part of your story and probably always will be.
Yeah.
The permission that you both gave yourselves to grieve together. And even now, 6 years later, for you to be able to still enter that process of grieving is so beautiful. I wonder if that's something that we try to escape or try to move through very quickly. I know in the past for me, it's, well, are you done yet? Are you good? You good? You good? Oh, I'm glad you're good. And I'm like, that's interesting. That we tend to rush grief. I think that would be a good way to pass.
Yes. As you bring that up, just thinking about if you're not connected, how do you know?
Yeah, good point. That's a good point.
And so being connected, I know, because I'm opening my heart up to all kinds of different things, and that stuff just flows in with it. And, I think one of the things about grief the tears is remembering her. I connect in those tears. They're something that I'm okay with. I'm okay with tears. I'm not trying to avoid them. I want them.
Yeah.
Because every time, even today, as that little piece comes up, something came up out of me. It left me. And through a connection with Cindy and with my grief, I'm a little bit lighter today, even after that. And so it's something that I've learned to embrace and look forward to it and create sometimes some spaces to make that happen.
Yeah.
To let the steam out and the stress out, and also remember Cindy in that.
Trauma is an interesting piece, isn't it? How just the different ways that it affects our bodies, and like you said, how it comes out. That's a little bit more out of you, in those moments.
Yes.
So often we try to just shove it under the rug or try to man up through it or not process the tears. That's something I really appreciate about you is you give permission for those you work with in story group to have tears, that tears are okay, that they're celebrated and not shoved down.
Yes, for sure.
So how does that impact our body when we release some of that emotion? How does that impact us?
I could give you a semi-crude description. When you get really sick to your stomach and you just feel awful, and then you just throw up. It comes out of your nose, and you taste all that acid, and you get it all cleaned out, and then you're like,
you feel better.
I would describe it in the group setting, especially as, because we enter a lot of harm, and you've experienced this, I believe, in the podcast weekend where we enter a lot of harm together, and at the end of the group, before we leave, we're laughing. We are in awe. We are lighter. And so I always experience something like that as we go through these group process deals. So my opinion of that is the crying, the tears, the connection to that emotion is letting something out of me. I have a couple of patterns of tears, and one of them that I seem to enjoy the most is like a panting of my stomach. And it's one of these things that just catch you, and you're panting, and there are some tears, but not many. And over the last 6 years, I've become able to relax within that and let that continue to go for a while and not shut it off. And all of that panting and all that movement, it's this stress coming out of my body. It's a release. And that's why I try to stay in it and not get in my head and click out, because I can't get in on my own. So it's something that comes, but that's the one I feel gives the most relief for me. And sometimes you'll have hardly any tears, but they're huge and they just drop. So I think there's different ways our body actually releases tears.
I've never
So
thought about how my tears come out before. That's interesting.
I don't know all of the chemical mixture of the tear things that are coming out, but there is also a healthy benefit of our tears coming out. And there's a function of that, of those tears and grief. So yes, they are welcomed and encouraged.
That's why it's such a, one of the many reasons it's such a safe space to come and do story work with your team.
Yes. There's some other things that they're not necessarily in the realm of doing a story work, but it's in the realm of being aware and choosing. And we'll keep going back to regulation, re-regulating, co-regulating. And that's a choice that we can make. And, I think in our group times, we'll use regulating and re-regulating during stories where we go out of the realm of tolerance, and you're in a 10 and you should be at a 6 or a 7 on the scale, as if you could measure one, but you sense those things. And we know when you're on the far end of hyper or hypo, any story work that we do is not going to connect your heart because you disconnected. It is a form of disassociation. So those things are important in our group time. And so we do use the breathing techniques throughout our group time. And then even as a leader, I'll use those because I'm deregulated. So it's important also as you're leading in a group that you stay regulated. And so I use the breathing thing all the time. And what I love about it in the group setting is this is co-regulation. Mm-hmm. Like there's this flavor of bonding in our breathing.
Yeah. Yep.
And so there's just a little hint of this connection that you feel in your body. And so I think that's important to remember too, is about the group work of this multi-layered piece of connection. It's many different places. And I think we did that little experiment when you guys were there. We had lunch and then we played a game, right?
Yeah. Yes. That was fun.
So we used that to illustrate coming out of the trauma work. Then we shift, everyone shifts. As we walk into the kitchen, as we start putting lunch together, everything lightens.
Yeah.
Everyone becomes a different kind of person. And we eat and we enjoy, we smell, we taste. We usually have something that's comfort foodish, so you just feel so good to eat it. And
we had hot roasted potatoes.
Yes,
I remember that.
And it feels so good to eat it, and we're just aware of this change. Yeah. And then we shifted over, and I think we played a game called Farkle. Mm-hmm. And everybody became 10 years old. Mm-hmm. It was really just like they were when they were a kid.
Yeah.
And so it's just a great illustration of how we shift as humans in different situations in different places. So being aware of those gives me more choice in how I care for myself in whatever setting I might be in. And so awareness, again, power, choice. And that's more of this realm of how am I going to care for myself? And that's this stored trauma process. And so like some things that I do would be, like I'm really into essential oils. I make my own lotions. And so I put patchouli in that. And so I reek of patchouli, and I disrupt people with the smell as I go about my business. I do coloring book in the morning, and I ground myself and let my brain re-regulate a bit. Walking, at one point in time, I walked a ton. So my body's moving. And, in some of these movement things like walking, I do like resistance training at the gym. So weights and machines. I do yoga a couple of times a week, and it's like stress relief. But all of those are body connections. And each one of those activities activate different biochemicals that my body receives. So I don't know if you've ever heard people talk about going to the gym, and if, I don't feel like good when I came in, but now that I've worked out, I feel better. Well, that's your body responding to your moving in the things that you're doing within the gym. So even to be aware of your body when you go for a walk, when you go to the gym, when you color, when you are doing any of these things, just this awareness that I can control some of the chemical or the biochemicals that are coming in and out of my body, so I can regulate my body in different ways. And so I purposely schedule. They don't always happen on the schedule, but I have a rhythm of this care for my trauma, stress that's in my body, and an awareness of what my body's doing to help move that out and bring in healing through the endorphins and adrenaline and dopamine and all the other reward center things that happen in some of those things. So those are other avenues on top of this kind of group work that you can utilize. And again, all of that's about connection.
Yeah. Connecting back to yourself and your own body.
And what's going on for me in my body.
Yeah. It's hard to sit down and color. I just started coloring recently and I love it. And it's hard to sit down and color though, and be making your to-do list for the day, or it's just a really great spot. You're just there. You're trying to stay in the lines. It's just a great way.
Yes.
To help be present like in your day.
Yeah. I like it.
What else? So there's ways that we can move trauma out of our bodies and stress, right? Trauma stress, I believe that's how you refer to it as. I know I've sat with women who say, I haven't had trauma in my life. And the more we dive into their story, and we're not looking for trauma, but the more we dive in, trauma means something different to everybody.
Yep.
I don't think, we talk about big T, little t trauma, and, we try to categorize it. What I found in the work that we do with women is that you can't compare for sure, but you almost can't categorize it. You never know how an event, a conversation, a core memory is going to impact your body. Tell us a little bit more about that. How do things get stuck in our body that need to be moved out?
Your body reacts to your interpretation.
That's a good point.
And it releases certain chemicals. And our bodies were made to digest and get those through in little spurts. But when it's ongoing and you never get to rest, we know the word hypervigilance. And most traumatized people, as I look at these things, you have there's emotion going on. Mm-hmm. It's moving in here. It's moving inside your body. So someone who has never been traumatized, and that's what they're saying, but it's going to show up in how they talk about themselves, how their relationships. And I don't get to define. I'm not looking to define small t, big T, other than for safety reasons. If it's a big T, and you want to make sure you're really safe around that process, but I don't get to define that. The person defines that. And so I don't have a concern. Like, that's not my concern. Like, how do I care for you? Why are you here? Why are we talking? Well, I wonder why you said that. I wonder where this came from. I wonder why every time you say that, you cringe. I wonder why you keep putting yourself down. I wonder why you hate that person. And our trauma, the effects of our trauma show up in our relationships. And so that's what's so awesome about what you do, is you do stories. Like, you do people, and you have a sense when something's not quite lined up.
How do we know that for ourselves? So let's say someone's listening and wondering, I wonder if I should be doing some of that work to move that stress out of my body. How does that show up in ways that we would recognize?
Yourself personally?
Yeah.
Well, it's really hard to see our own structures, our own patterns, our own themes, because we self-justify so much. And so it's much easier to say things and step into other people than it is to step into our own.
Okay.
And that's
story work.
Yeah, that's why we need group. We need community, and we need people that are honest but kind, and that will say, and the whole thing, this is structured to expose all that. Like, so it's not regular life.
Right. Good
where
point.
You can hide behind this, you can hide behind that, and you can excuse your way out. This context is, the curriculum is staged in a way to just unpeel all this. Yeah. And it's really hard to stay hidden.
That's very true, because I believe I tried that a little bit in our podcast weekend a couple years back. I believe I tried that a little bit.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. And it was a beautiful breaking in a way. for me to open up and it's such a safe place.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about this in the last episode that we're doing some podcast weekends with you guys at the Narrow Gate. We're joining forces. I'm so excited about that. I love cross-pollination of ministries, and I'm so excited to do that. We are full for that event this fall. But tell us, how do you offer this with the Narrow Gate?
I mean, what we're wanting to do, it takes people to do it. And so what we've done over the last 6 years is we've done some journey group with the Open Hearts Ministry. We like to start with that. It's a 12-session program that takes you through your family of origin. And so it's for, it's really, really helpful for people who've never done story work at all. And it's really, really disruptive. But it's basically a doorway in. And so the Allender stuff, the story work goes into more detail about how do we engage the stuff behind what just got opened up. And so we also have a journey book 2, which is we use a body outline. So you lay down and get traced, your body gets traced, and then we put it up on the wall, and then we begin to fill that in through our 12 sessions of different woundings and where you hold that in your body. And that's just an awesome process. I mean, because you're up on your feet and you're using right, left brain, and there can be creativity. And one of the things I love about the group work is it's group work. Like, people in the group are a part of the whole thing. Like, and when you have a good working group, then you don't have to do a whole lot. Like, and so it's so cool. I love Journey 2 just because it's a little easier. It's a little slow letters, slow moving. But the story's there. You don't have to remember it. It's written, it's drawn out. But the things that the participants see, and maybe this might be literally their second group time together. And I'm just saying that anybody can say something and have a profound impact on the group. And it happens every single time. And to me, that's just the Spirit of God moves, and he moves through people. Like, if you're in our group, there's words that only you can say. No one can say the words that you can say because it's going to come through your grid.
Right.
And through your story. So you'll see a special flavor or a taste or a thing that no one else in the group can see. And when you speak it, it's just this dynamic. So we use those 2 processes to bring people into our team. And then our team, the concept behind the Narrow Gate is to care for caregivers. And so as we offer these Journey 1s and Journeys 2s, the leaders that do that will be doing story work. So we've done like Healing the Wounded Heart, a thing called To Be Told, a thing called Story Sage, just some Allender Center stuff. And now we're using a podcast from Adam Young. It's called The Places We Find Ourselves. And he's got a certain teaching and the podcast, and like we'll be doing this weekend, we'll be doing a thing called The Big Six. And then we'll also be doing a second podcast that's about the U, which about going down to death before resurrection, because everybody wants to jump over. And so how do we get into the death part of the story so that redemption can take place? And so we'll be using that just to, again, build this trust. But so we use podcast stuff to help us as a community. And that's what we're trying to build, a bigger community of leaders, a community of care. So churches, wherever people are traumatized, they don't know what to do with them, could come over and we can offer care to them. That's the goal.
That's so amazing. So if people are in Tucson, they can participate in your in-person groups. Let's say someone was in Ohio. Could they still reach out to you and you could connect them with a journey group or Open Hearts Ministry?
Yes. And we're beginning to have Open Hearts Ministry. We just did something similar to what we're going to do on a Zoom thing for OHM that we're starting to use to train leaders and invite OHM family into. So we're trying to build this Zoom opportunities that it would do exactly what you're talking about.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Dale, thank you for, I think I said this last time, but I think about this is thank you for going there. I know Dan Allender says we can't take people farther than we're willing to go ourselves. And you've gone into some depth of your own story and then entering other people's stories. It's not easy work, but it is beautiful. Thank you for all you do.
Yes.
And if someone wants to connect with you, whether they're in Tucson and going, I want to be in this journey group that you're doing, or whether they're in Ohio, how can they reach you?
thetensionofhope.com is our webpage, and you can just leave a message on there, or my email is dhodgeson2@gmail.com.
Perfect. And we'll put that in the show notes as well, so everybody can grab that. So get ready.
Nice.
I think this pokes a place in our lives when we feel stuck as adults, when we feel patterns repeating and want to know how do we get out of this? It's going back to where they originated from and doing this story work. So thank you for engaging in this process and for leading others into doing their own process of it.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I look forward to having you back on the podcast. There's about 100 different topics I think we could list that we could have some really robust conversations on. So we'll have to do this again, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I pray you found hope in today's conversation and maybe even feel a little less alone in your story. Stay connected with us on Facebook and Instagram at Reclaimed Story. Want to learn more about living a reclaimed life and how you can be a part of our growing community of reclaimers? Check out our website at reclaimedstory.com. All of those links and more will be in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this inspirational podcast, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Not only will you be the first one to know when new content comes out, but it is also a huge help in helping us reach more people to live the reclaimed life.